is Townsquare Sunday on 1420 WBSM, a place where people come together to talk about some of the good things happening in and around New Bedford, a place to share, a place on the radio for the people.
Come together right now over me.
And now, the moderator of Townsquare Sunday, 1420 WBSM's Jim Phillips.
Well, this is our weekly public affairs program on WBSM. I'm Jim Phillips, your host for Townsquare Sunday. Thanks for joining us. My leadoff guest is UMass Dartmouth professor Dr. Brian Glyn Williams. He's considered an expert on the U.S. military role in Afghanistan and on culture in the Muslim world. He had an interesting experience not too long ago. He served as a cultural advisor for the movie 12 Strong. That's a film that depicted the true story of U.S. Special Forces deployed to Afghanistan about a month after the 9/11 attacks. Professor Williams, welcome.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You lived in Afghanistan for a time, so you're very familiar with the culture and the devastation, frankly, that's gone on there, not only since the United States has been there, but before, which is... I hesitate to say, but it's decades and decades of war there, maybe more, right?
Yeah, well, the war goes back to 1979. You may recall that the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan back on December 25th, 1979, and launched a devastating war. 1.5 million people died in the 80s, and then you had civil war, and then, of course, the Taliban conquered the country, and finally we liberated the country in 2001, and been fighting insurgency ever since. So, yeah, decades of warfare and conflict and tragedy.
Now, as we've mentioned, you were a cultural advisor to this movie, 12 Strong. I did see the movie this past week, and it certainly looked like how most of us would envision Afghanistan. This was not filmed in Afghanistan, obviously, but filmed in New Mexico.
Yes, I traveled to the movie sets south of Albuquerque in New Mexico, and it was eerie how closely the deserts and the mountains and the scrub and the actual footage, the place they filmed the movie, it really resembled the Afghanistan I know. It was eerie arriving on the movie set and seeing real Soviet tanks from a nearby army base, very similar to the ones I'd seen blown up on the side of the highways in Afghanistan. And the main actor playing the warlord in the movie, the local Afghan warlord who joins forces with the Americans, a warlord named Dostum, who I write about in my book, The Last Warlord. Suddenly the actor playing the warlord Dostum rides up on a horse on the movie set in New Mexico, and it was eerie how much it resembled the real warlord who I met and lived with in the mountains of Afghanistan back in 2003 and 2005.
So how do you go about being selected for the job of cultural advisor? And what do you do there? How busy are you?
Well, it was fascinating. As I said, I'd spent a couple summers living in a compound with a warlord way up in the deserts of northern Afghanistan, Dostum, the Taliban slayer, they call him, the Taliban killer. And I wrote this book about his life called The Last Warlord, and it sort of tells the story of 12 Strong, the movie, but only from the Afghan perspective, from the local warlord's perspective. He became friends with Americans who landed in Green Beret helicopters, these Blackhawks, and together they waged horse war against the common enemy. So I told that story in my book, Last Warlord. When making the movie, they decided needed my angle. So I flew out to the movie set in New Mexico, and I advised them on costumes. What do the local Afghan Uzbek Mongol warriors wear? I actually arranged to have them meet my former head at the CIA to come to the movie set and advise them, or vice versa. I also had my book given to the scriptwriters, and they used The Last Warlord's sort of scenes and battle action and history of this warlord to recreate the other half of the movie, the Afghan angle.
So how close to is the movie to what happened in real life? By the way you're speaking, I think you feel it's pretty realistic.
Yeah, I've written a couple articles about the veracity of the movie and how authentic it is. And it does hew very closely to the story I tell in my book. It is very accurate in the fact that there was this Afghan warlord named General Dostum, who, by the way, is an Uzbek Mongol, and he had a small band of rebels way up in the mountains fighting a blood feud against the Aryan Taliban down in the valleys. And along comes this Green Beret team in a Black Hawk helicopter and the CIA, and together they forged a brotherhood. And that's what I love about this story. You know, it captures that in the movie very clearly. That you have this captain of the Green Berets, a guy named Mark Nutch, who's come and spoken to my classes here at UMass Dartmouth, and he's been gracious enough to tell my students his stories. And, you know, the stories he told me and the stories Dostum told me of this brotherhood between a guy from Kansas and a Turco-Mongol warlord almost in the Middle Ages is so beautifully told in the movie. It captures this friendship as the two allies from different worlds join forces to somehow overcome vast obstacles and break out of the mountains on horseback, calling in airstrikes and acting almost as insurgents, only armed with U.S. precision-guided bombs. There are mistakes. There are, of course, some Hollywood twists and turns and sensationalism, but it does in many ways resemble the story told to me both by Captain Mark Nutch of the Green Berets, by JR of the CIA, and also by General Dostum, the sort of unsung hero, this Muslim Mongol warlord fighting a blood feud before 9/11 against the Taliban.
So let's talk about General Dostum for a minute. What kind of a man was he? Did the movie get that right, or did you see some things in your own relationship with him that may have changed? You know, that's a little different.
Yeah, well, you know, I traveled here from UMass Dartmouth to Istanbul and into Kabul, Afghanistan, and over the mountains to meet this larger-than-life warlord who'd helped us win the war. And I found him to be incredibly gregarious, warm, welcoming. He was very much an admirer of America. You know, he was a Muslim. He was fighting the Taliban before we got in the war, and I admired him. And he had a lot of love for his brothers, the 12 Jasurs, the 12 strong ones, as he always called them, the 12 Green Berets who fought alongside him. You know, and he told me, if those brothers ever need me, I will go to fight with them. And Mark Nutch told me the same thing. You know, Captain Mark Nutch of the Green Berets had a lot of admiration for the Uzbeks. And he wants to build a statue in their honor. So, you know, I think one aspect of the movie that is wrong is that there is this tension between them, this trust. And both Mark Nutch and General Dostum, the Uzbek warlord, told me that they instantly created synergy, friendship, a shared mission. And in the movie, they have Dostum at one point getting angry and petulant and becoming an angry warlord and leaving the battle. But that never happened in real life. Dostum was always at the lead. Dostum was a man who created the blueprint for the campaign. He led the Americans. You know, it was his terrain, his horses, his battle plan. Well, that's Hollywood dramatic license. I mean, I'm not sure we can change that. But, you know, look, it was somewhat entertaining. And, you know, the movie did stick around here quite a while. I'm sure your students may have checked it out. It's mandatory watching. All my students have to go watch it. In fact, we read the book, The Last Warlord, you know, I've written my account of it in class. And they have to go watch the movie, and they come back and they love it. You know, because most Americans don't realize that there was no massive Iraq-style invasion of Afghanistan back in 2001. We sent in only 300 boots on the ground, and these small groups of Green Beret Special Forces and CIA leveraged these local tribesmen who had a blood feud and used them as our proxy force to break out of the mountains and seize this holy shrine, the Vatican of Afghanistan, I call it, the shrine of Mazar Sharif. And that broke the fighting spirit of the Taliban. And in just 2 months, the whole Taliban regime fell. So the movie is remarkable, and it captures this remote, covert campaign that unites men from different worlds to fight the common enemy in the days after 9/11. In the movie, Dostum tells the American team leader that in the end, America will become just another tribe here. Did that ever happen? Well, you know, I thought that was a very poetic line. You know, I was out in Hollywood with Nikolai Fugelsig, the director, and Jerry Bruckheimer, the producer, and Molly Smith, another producer. And I commented on that line. I thought it was a beautiful line. You know, to a degree, America is more than just a tribe, though. You know, we are a mega superpower, and I think that was a poetic line. I loved it. But we are the ones who buttress the government. We're the ones who support democracy. And I got to tell you, when I travel in Afghanistan, I'm going back there again this May. I travel across the country far and wide. I love what we've done there. from the beautiful roads and highways to the schools where girls go to school now and have an education. Young men learn things other than the Quran, and they now have options to work in cities. The population has increased. 2/3 of the country has more stability than ever before. There are no more public stonings in Kabul. So I think we're more than just a tribe, but it is a very poetic line, and I loved it.
You're listening to Townsquare Sunday. My guest is UMass Dartmouth professor Dr. Brian Glyn Williams, who served as cultural advisor for the movie 12 Strong. I've had people say to me, people who've been there, people who've served there, that Afghanistan is probably more dangerous now than it was 5 years ago. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. That's a good assessment. I've been going back regularly over the years, and it has a lot of the territories I used to drive in. I used to get a Toyota Corolla and put on a shalwar kameez robe, grow my beard a little longer, and sort of just travel across the country. And a lot of those roads I traveled on in the past, down to Pakistan or up towards Uzbekistan or over towards Iran, a lot of those roads are now ruled by the Taliban. They're called red zones. And sadly, they've conquered maybe 1/3 of the country. And there they enforce their harsh Sharia law. They are trying to bring it back into this sort of religious prison camp that it was before. So sadly, the country has in many ways bogged us down. And we are still fighting there. We have 14,000 troops. And I think it's a war we're going to be in for the long run if we want to stop the Taliban from conquering the country and converting it back into a prison camp and, of course, giving sanctuary to al-Qaeda.
There has been fighting, as you mentioned earlier at the start of our broadcast here, for many, many years. Is there anything that can stop it besides a full-blown military commitment by the United States?
Well, the one solution is to force the Pakistanis to stop giving sanctuary on their territory to the Taliban. The Pakistanis are our frenemies. We've given them about $20 billion in coalition support funds, and they're very helpful in helping us get al-Qaeda. But they weren't there for us when it comes to the local indigenous Taliban. The Taliban have cross-border sanctuaries inside of Pakistani territory, and they use this as bases for launching attacks, for regrouping. So it's hard to win an insurgency when you have the enemy going across the border and finding sanctuary in Pakistan. So I think it's crucial for us to have a hammer and an anvil, and we need the Pakistanis to be the anvil so we can crush the Taliban between us.
When were you last in Afghanistan, sir?
Last time I was there was 2009.
All right.
I was working for the U.S. military at a forward operating base back in the summer of 2009.
All right. So probably not fair to ask you about the morale of the forces there now, but clearly we've spent a long time there. It's our longest war.
Yes, it is our longest war. And, over the years I've got to know soldiers serving there. And, the morale was low back in, say, 2003, 2005. I remember going up to Bagram Air Base in 2007, I think it was, too. I was working with the CIA's Counterterrorism Center. I was tracking suicide bombers. And I met a team there doing information operations for the U.S. Army. And the morale was low because so much of the attention was focused on Iraq. The troops in Afghanistan felt like they were in the forgotten war. All the oxygen had been sucked out of the original war against al-Qaeda to go fight in Iraq against an enemy we created, these Sunni insurgents, these Shiite insurgents. So the morale was low then. But then we had a massive troop surge under Obama in the final years, 2011 and 12 and 10. And the morale went higher then because there was more supplies, more focus, more drones, more satellite imagery, more troops. But now we're down to 14,000 troops. And, I don't know, I can't say how the morale is on the bases there, but I've come in contact with a lot of Green Berets in the community I know, and they believe in the cause. They believe in the mission, and they believe Afghanistan can be saved with a small footprint. 14,000 troops goes a long way when they have access to the U.S. Air Armada and to funds, and we can buttress the government and keep the Taliban out of Kabul, the capital, and out of all the cities.
You've written a book entitled Afghanistan Unclassified, which I understand is almost required reading for troops heading to that war-torn nation. What's in the book?
Yeah, so I was asked by the U.S. Army. They had a unit called the Joint Information Operations Warfare Command, and they hired me to write a manual for the whole Afghan theater of operations. There was no manual for Afghan theater for tribes, for terrain, history, politics. What is the war about? Who are we fighting? What's the recent history of the conflict? So I was given a mission to write this manual. I wrote that for them in about 8 months. I had a lot of pressure to get it done fast. And then they distributed that to the troops going to fight in this theater of action. And over the years, I've been honored and gratified to have soldiers email me and call me saying, I was deployed to Afghanistan. I didn't know where I was going. I'm from Kansas or Tennessee. I didn't know the Hindu Kush Mountains. I didn't know that the Taliban all mainly came from the Pashtun tribe and that the Uzbek Mongols are our friends, or the history of the Soviet invasion, or the history of our own war. So it's been a huge honor for me to have the book Afghanistan Declassified, also published by a university press, and it's now available on Amazon.com.
Professor Williams, thanks very much. I hope we can talk again when you return from Afghanistan later this year, perhaps.
Well, Tashakura, thank you. The honor's all mine, and I look forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. My guest has been Dr. Brian Glyn Williams, a UMass Dartmouth professor, considered an expert in Afghanistan. He also served as cultural advisor for the movie 12 Strong, based on a true story of Special Forces personnel deployed to Afghanistan following the 9/11 attacks. Townsquare Sunday returns in just a moment.